My cruel mother-in-law closed the door behind me and threw me out of the house when I was pregnant. She insisted that I transfer ownership of my $25 million home to my husband, her son. She said that I should get ready for a divorce if I didn't agree. My spouse did not support me at all. He stood by her side. They pushed me away, threw out everything I owned, and urged me to leave when I resisted. As I left the house I had worked so hard to construct, I felt so alone and powerless. But I made a choice right then. They couldn't get away with this, in my opinion. I chose to fight back and kept my plans to myself. I waited for the appropriate moment to disclose my intentions before taking them both to court. Everyone was astonished by the outcome when the court rendered its ruling. I'm Amy, and I've always thought that the secret to living a fulfilling life is independence. I was pleased of my accomplishments as a suburban Las Vegas real estate agent at the age of 33. I had put in many hours to advance my job and accumulate sufficient funds to purchase the house of my dreams. My $25 million house wasn't just a place to live. It represented all my hard work and the life I had always wanted. I also dreamed of having a loving marriage when I met Owen, a 36-year-old tech consultant. Everything seemed perfect. He was charming, smart, and acted like he respected my goals and dreams. Our wedding day was a joyful celebration of our love and commitment, but little did I know it was also the start of a very painful chapter in my life. On the day of our wedding, I was so happy, but something felt a little off. As I walked down the aisle, I noticed Owen seemed distant, like his thoughts were somewhere else. I told myself it was just nerves. It was a big day for both of us, and I focused on the life I thought we were about to build together. After the wedding, we moved into my house, excited to start our life as husband and wife. For a while, everything seemed perfect. As days turned into weeks, I noticed a change in Owen's behavior. He became distant, and his mother, Mia, started showing up unannounced. Mia, a 63-year-old retired teacher, often came by and shared her opinions about everything in the house. "Amy, dear, have you thought about changing the curtains? They don't match the sofa," she'd say, her tone dripping with judgment. I wanted to defend my choices, to speak up, but I kept quiet, hoping to keep the peace. After all, I was married to her son, and I told myself this might just be how families behave. I tried to ignore her remarks, but over time they began to affect me. I started doubting my choices, my taste, my decisions, and even my value as a wife. One day I decided to talk to Owen. "You know I love our home, but your mom's comments are really bothering me. Can we set some boundaries?" I asked, hoping he'd understand. He sighed and looked away. "She's just trying to help, Amy. Family supports each other. You know how moms can be." His response hurt me deeply. Disappointment washed over me. Was my happiness in this marriage going to be ruined by his mother's constant interference? Still, I chose to stay quiet, hoping things would get better. Then, one evening, everything changed. After a long day at work, I came home and found Mia standing in the living room with suitcases piled around her. "This is my son's house, too," she announced, as if I should have expected it. I froze, my heart racing. "Mia, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "I've decided to move in. You can't expect Owen to live without his mother, can you?" Her tone was flat, as though this was the most normal thing in the world. A sinking feeling took over me. "But this is my home. We never talked about this," I said, my voice shaking. "Emmy, you need to understand that family is important. You knew that when you married him," she replied, as if it was obvious. I felt my world falling apart. I turned to Owen, desperate for his support. "Owen, please say something. This isn't right." He looked torn, glancing between his mother and me. "Mom just wants to help us, Amy. We can make this work." A wave of betrayal hit me colder and sharper than anything I had ever felt. I stood there, feeling utterly alone in what was supposed to be my safe place, my home. It no longer felt like my sanctuary. Instead, it felt like a battleground, and the one person who should have stood by me had let me down. I had trusted my husband to stand by me, but instead he chose his mother over me. That realization hit me like a brick wall. I felt like I was fighting for my own space in my own life, and it was exhausting. As the weeks went by, things only got worse. Mia was always there, like an unshakable shadow, and her presence made me feel trapped. When I found out I was pregnant, I hoped this would bring Owen and me closer. I thought the news might change things for the better, but when I told him and Mia, her reaction crushed me. She didn't show any joy or even warmth. Instead, she raised an eyebrow and said, "You'll need to watch your diet. We don't want any health issues." Her cold, indifferent words shattered any hope I had of finding support or happiness during what should have been a joyful time. I found myself missing the days when my life was simple and full of promise. I couldn't help but wonder how things had gone so wrong. Then one late night, after a long, tiring day at work, I came home to find the door locked. I knocked softly, expecting Owen to let me in. Instead, I heard Mia's voice from the other side, cold and firm. "You're not coming in unless you agree to sign the house over to Owen," she said. My heart sank. "Mia, please let me in. This is my home," I begged. "Not anymore, dear. This is my son's house now. Either you sign it over, or I'll call the police and report you for trespassing," she snapped. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I had worked so hard to build my independence, only to be locked out of my own home. Tears streamed down my face as I realized I had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I felt like a stranger in the life I had built for myself. That night, I sat on the porch, the cold air chilling me to the bone. I felt completely betrayed, but as I sat there in despair, something inside me shifted. I realized I couldn't let them break me. I needed a plan, a way to take back control of my life. I decided to leave for a while to clear my head. The next day, I packed a bag and went to stay with my parents. I knew they would welcome me with open arms, and I needed their support more than ever. When I arrived, my mom hugged me tightly and said, "Amy, you can stay here as long as you need. We'll figure this out together." My parents' home brought me some comfort. My dad, a retired police officer, and my mom, a warm and caring homemaker, reminded me of what unconditional love felt like. Their support gave me strength, but I knew I had to face this situation and stand up for myself. Deep down, I felt a fire start to burn. It was time to fight back. I was tired of being treated like a victim. I wanted my life back, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. That's when I reached out to Jessica, a close friend from college who had become a successful lawyer. She had always been someone I could trust, and now I needed her help more than ever. When I told her everything, Jessica's response was firm and comforting. "Amy, this is unacceptable. You have every right to fight back. The first step is filing for divorce and taking back your life," she said with confidence. Her words gave me the strength I needed to hear. Hearing the words divorce made everything feel real. But what if Owen fought back? She had already shown how ruthless she could be. I admit it, letting my fear show. "Let them try," Jessica said without hesitation. "You have the law on your side. The emotional abuse and manipulation they've put you through can't be ignored. We'll build a strong case." Over the next few days, we worked together to make a solid plan. Jessica guided me on how to gather evidence of the abuse I had endured. I started collecting everything: text messages, voicemails, and even the threats I'd received. I kept a detailed journal, writing down every moment that made me feel small, every time they tried to control or belittle me. One evening, as I was adding to my journal, a specific memory came rushing back. It was a few weeks before I moved out. I had come home after a long, exhausting day, excited to share my pregnancy news with Owen. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and found Mia sitting at the table, going through my personal files. Shocked, I asked, "Mia, what are you doing?" She looked up, completely unfazed. "Just checking your finances. You're going to be a mother, so it's important to be prepared," she said, as if invading my privacy was perfectly normal. "Mia, that's not your place. You have no right to go through my things," I said, my voice trembling with anger. But she only shrugged, her face cold and emotionless, and continued rifling through my papers as if my protest meant nothing. That memory reminded me why I needed to fight. It wasn't just about standing up to them. It was about reclaiming my freedom and self-respect. That moment made me truly understand how much control Mia had and how little she respected my privacy or my rights. With Jessica's help, I knew I was building a strong case, and I was ready to stand up for myself, no matter how hard or painful it might be. This was my life, and I was done letting anyone take it from me. I had protested that day, feeling my anger rise. "This is my business, Mia. You have no right to meddle in our finances," I said firmly, even though my voice was shaking. She gave me a cold smile and said, "Your husband's finances are my concern too, Amy. If he struggles, we all struggle. We wouldn't want that, would we?" Her words felt like a slap, and in that moment I felt completely powerless. But thinking back on that interaction now, my determination only grew stronger. I wasn't going to let her or Owen control my life anymore. I was done being treated as if I didn't matter in my own home. As I continued planning my next steps, I realized I wasn't alone. Jessica, my friend and lawyer, was a steady source of support. My parents, too, were my emotional anchors. Their love and encouragement reminded me of my strength and gave me the courage I needed to fight for myself. One evening over dinner with my mom and dad, I shared my decision to file for divorce. "I can't let them control me anymore," I said firmly. "I want my home back, and I want to be free from their manipulation." My dad looked at me with pride in his eyes. "Amy, you're making the right choice," he said. "We'll be here for you every step of the way." The next day, with my heart racing, I went to Jessica's office to start the divorce process. As I signed the papers, I felt a mix of fear and empowerment. This was the first step toward taking my life back. In the weeks that followed, Jessica and I worked tirelessly to gather evidence and build a strong case. Every day was an emotional roller coaster as I relived painful memories and prepared for the hearing. It felt like I was a soldier preparing for battle. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. My stomach churned with nerves as I sat in the courthouse, surrounded by other people fighting their own battles. My palms were sweaty, and my heart raced in my chest. Jessica sat beside me, holding my hand. "Amy, you're going to do great," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "Just remember, you're fighting for yourself and your future." Her words gave me a sense of calm, and I took a deep breath, ready to face what lay ahead. I took a deep breath and focused on what I wanted: freedom, peace, and a life where I was in control. I was done being afraid. I was ready to face Owen and Mia in court. When the judge called my case, a surge of adrenaline rushed through me. This was it, the moment I had worked so hard to prepare for. As I walked into the courtroom, I felt the weight of my decision pressing on me. The room was tense, filled with the soft murmurs of people waiting for their cases to be heard. In the distance, I heard the sharp strike of the gavel. My heart raced as I spotted Owen and Mia sitting at the front. Owen's face was blank, but his clenched jaw gave away his tension. Mia's gaze was sharp and cold as it landed on me. She gave me a chilling look that sent a shiver down my spine. "Amy, just stay calm," Jessica whispered as we took our seats. "We've prepared for this. You're not alone." The judge, a middle-aged woman with a commanding presence, entered the room, and everyone stood until she sat down. As I sat back down, I felt my confidence grow. This was my chance to reveal the truth about the manipulation and emotional abuse I had endured. The judge began by asking for an overview of the case. Jessica stood up, her voice clear and strong as she presented our side. She explained how Owen and Mia had tried to control my life and described the emotional toll it had taken on me, especially during my pregnancy. She made it clear this case was about my right to live freely and without fear in my own home. "Your Honor," Jessica began, "my client, Amy, is here today to reclaim her life from her husband and mother-in-law, who have systematically tried to control her. We have evidence of emotional abuse and coercion, particularly during her pregnancy and regarding the ownership of her home. We believe this requires immediate action." I glanced at Owen. His face was still emotionless, but his fingers gripped the edge of the table tightly. Mia, on the other hand, looked relaxed. She leaned closer to Owen, a slight smug smile on her face, her eyes never leaving me. As the hearing continued, we presented the evidence we had gathered: text messages, voicemails, and detailed records of manipulation and threats. Jessica emphasized how the emotional abuse had affected my mental health and well-being, especially during my pregnancy. She painted a vivid picture of the cold, hostile environment Mia had created in my home and how Owen had chosen to side with his mother instead of supporting me. Owen's lawyer tried to downplay their actions, arguing that Mia was only concerned about her son's well-being, but the evidence we provided was overwhelming. Jessica had prepared everything with incredible detail, and it was clear the judge was listening closely. Finally, it was my turn to speak. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Your Honor, I loved my husband and welcomed his family into my life, but they took advantage of my trust. They turned my home into a place of fear and isolation. All I want is to have my independence back," I said. As I spoke, I noticed Owen glance down, his expression finally changing. Mia's confident smile faded slightly. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my own story. This was just the start, but I knew that no matter what came next, I was ready to face it. I felt a mix of fear and determination as I listened to Owen's lawyer. He argued that I was trying to cut Owen off from his family for financial gain. "Amy is exaggerating her claims to take control of their shared assets," he said smoothly. But I was ready. When it was my turn to testify, I stood up, took a deep breath, and glanced at Jessica. She gave me an encouraging nod. "I was excited to marry Owen and build a life together," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. But almost immediately I felt like a stranger in my own home. His mother moved in without my consent and started telling me how I should live my life. I paused, remembering the pain of the night Mia locked me out. I described everything: the threats, the cold indifference, and the helplessness I felt standing outside my own home. As I spoke, I noticed the judge leaning forward, listening closely to every word. I never thought I'd be fighting for my own home and my freedom, I continued, feeling a surge of emotion. This isn't just about property, it's about my identity and my future as a mother. I refuse to raise my child in an environment where I am constantly belittled and controlled. When I finished speaking, the courtroom fell silent. The judge was taking notes, and I caught a glimpse of Owen's face. His confident expression had faltered. A wave of empowerment washed over me. I had spoken my truth. As the hearing came to a close, the judge turned to Owen and Mia. Her voice was firm. "You both need to understand the seriousness of this situation. The emotional well-being of a mother and her child is of the highest importance." As we left the courtroom, Jessica squeezed my hand and said, "You did an incredible job, Amy." I felt confident that we had a strong case, but as I walked out of the courtroom, I saw Owen and Mia whispering to each other. Their faces were tense and angry. My stomach dropped. I knew they wouldn't give up without a fight. The threat of their retaliation loomed over me, but I was ready. I had faced my fears, and no matter what came next, I was determined to protect myself and my unborn child. What I didn't know was that the real battle was just beginning. The next twist in the story would test everything. I thought I knew about betrayal and revenge. The days after the court hearing were filled with anxiety and waiting. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, balancing between hope and fear. Jessica and I kept preparing, sensing that Owen and Mia were planning something. About a week later, I got an urgent call from Jessica. "Amy, we need to meet. There's something important to discuss," she said. My heart raced as I rushed to her office, where she greeted me with a serious look. "I just found out that Owen and Mia are planning to fight back," she said. "They're trying to discredit your claims by saying you're emotionally unstable and unfit to be a mother." A wave of anger swept over me. "That's a lie," I said, clenching my fists. "I can't believe they'd sink this low." "It's a common tactic," Jessica explained calmly. "But it shows they're desperate. We can fight this, Amy. We just need more evidence of the emotional abuse you've endured." That night I sat down with my journal and began writing. I poured out all the memories of times when I felt belittled, ignored, and treated as if I didn't matter. Every word I wrote reminded me of the strength I was building. I wasn't the timid woman they thought they could control anymore. A week later, I received a formal notice for another court appearance. My anxiety returned, but this time I was determined. I wouldn't just defend myself. I would stand tall and fight for my future and my child's well-being. When the day arrived, I entered the courtroom with a mix of fear and determination. Just like before, Owen and Mia were already seated, their faces hard and unyielding. This time, though, I was ready to face them head-on. The tension in the room was heavy, but I was ready to face it. Jessica presented our case again, focusing on how Owen and Mia's actions had taken an emotional toll on me, especially during my pregnancy. We showed the judge text messages from Mia, full of subtle insults and controlling remarks. I watched as the judge carefully reviewed the evidence, her brow furrowing in concentration. Then it was my turn to speak. I took a deep breath and looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I'm not here to destroy a family," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm here to reclaim my life and ensure a safe environment for my child. I can't let my mother-in-law control my life anymore." As I spoke, I felt the quiet support of my parents sitting in the back of the courtroom. Their presence was like a protective shield, giving me strength. With them behind me, I shared some of the most painful moments I had endured. I talked about how trapped and powerless I had felt under Owen and Mia's control. Each word I spoke felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I could see the judge listening intently, her expression softening as she took in my story. Owen's lawyer tried to push back, painting me as irrational and emotionally unstable. But Jessica didn't let up. She countered every point, using the evidence of Mia's manipulation and constant belittling to prove our case. By the end of the hearing, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I had stood up for myself, shared the truth about what I had endured, and refused to stay silent any longer. No matter what lay ahead, I knew I had taken back control of my life. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace beginning to grow inside me. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready to keep fighting for myself and my child. I was determined to rebuild my life, free from the shadows of control and betrayal. I spoke honestly about how I had been locked out of my own home and how piece by piece my identity had been taken from me. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted as the judge absorbed my words. Her expression changed with each detail I shared, and I could see her taking my story seriously. When it was Owen's turn to speak, he struggled. His arguments were clumsy, and he seemed shaken, far less confident than before. Mia, on the other hand, remained stubborn, trying to control the narrative. But with every passing minute, it was clear her manipulation was losing its power. After a long, exhausting session, the judge finally called for a recess. As we stepped out of the courtroom, I felt a sense of quiet strength. The battle wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next. I felt both exhausted and hopeful. A couple of hours later, we were called back into the courtroom. The judge returned to deliver her decision. Her voice was steady and clear as she spoke. Based on the evidence presented and the testimonies given, I find that Amy has been subjected to emotional abuse and manipulation. Therefore, I am granting her full custody of her child and sole ownership of the house. Owen and Mia will face penalties for their actions. Relief washed over me like a wave. A heavy weight I had been carrying for so long was finally lifted, replaced by a sense of freedom and validation. Tears filled my eyes, not just from happiness, but also from the bittersweet realization that the family I thought I had was gone. As we walked out of the courtroom, Jessica hugged me tightly. "You did it, Amy," she said, her voice full of pride. "You fought for your rights and you won." I smiled and whispered, "I did it because I knew I deserved better." In the weeks that followed, I moved back into my home and began reclaiming my space and my peace. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. I painted the walls, redecorated, and started preparing for my baby. Every moment was filled with hope and purpose, taking me further away from the shadows of the past. I was ready to embrace single motherhood and create a loving, stable home. Looking back on everything I had been through, I realized that the betrayal hadn't broken me. It had made me stronger. I had discovered how crucial it was to defend my rights and take back my identity. I was a survivor now, not just a victim. And I was pleased with the path that had led me to this point. I spoke to my unborn kid as I held my expanding belly. We will create a life that is full of power, love, and respect. You'll always be able to defend yourself. I understood then and there. This was the beginning of a new legacy for my child, not just a fresh start for myself. A legacy based on fortitude and empowerment. Knowing that I had at last taken back my life, I was prepared to face whatever lay ahead.